You know, it's funny, isn't it? We're all like hyper connected online all the time. But
Mhm.
does it ever feel like maybe those real world bonds are kind of fading? Like maybe we're more digitally there, but less actually together. If you've maybe felt that little drift, that sense that something shifted in how we connect, well, you're definitely onto something. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a topic that, well, it gets talked about, but maybe not enough, and it's got huge implications. Our sources call it the sex recession. And honestly, the numbers we're going to share, they might really surprise you, especially given how plugged in we all seem to be. So, our mission today, it's simple, really. We're here to break down the sources we have in front of us. We've got two key documents from Devin McClarty and D Investment Enterprise, LLC, The Declining State of Intimacy and Belonging, and the Sex Recession, Causes and Consequences. We're going to pull these apart, look at the data, the arguments, basically figure out what's really going on and why it matters, like why it matters to you. Because this isn't just about stats, right? It's about something bigger, a real societal shift in belonging, connection, how we relate.
Absolutely. And these sources, I have to say, they're incredibly thorough. They give this really comprehensive, data-driven look. McClarty's work doesn't just skim the surface. It really lets us examine this whole complex web of factors. We're talking lifestyle changes, the huge impact of tech, even those sort of subtle economic and psychological pressures. All these things are reshaping intimacy
Right?
in ways we might not even realize. It's about peeling back those layers, getting to the core.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this sex recession, we need to look at the hard numbers first. And like I said, they're pretty striking. McClarty's research paints a really clear picture. So get this. In 2024, only 37% of American adults, that's ages 18 to 64, said they had sex at least once a week.
37% weekly.
Yeah. And compare that to 1990 when it was 55%.
Wow, 55 down to 37.
That's a huge drop, nearly 20 points in what, just over 3 decades?
Mm.
That feels like more than just a minor fluctuation. That feels like a generational shift happening right under our noses. It really makes you ask, what does that kind of change actually mean for us?
It's a critical question because, like you said, this isn't some random blip on the radar. It's a clear, measurable decline that's been tracked.
Yeah.
And what's really quite concerning is how this hits younger adults. For the 18 to 29 group, the number reporting no sex at all the past year, it's doubled since 2010.
Doubled.
Doubled. It's up to 24%. That's almost 1 in 4 young adults saying no sex in the last year.
Damn, N4. Wow.
And the sources are really clear. This isn't just, one particular group. It's happening across the board. Married people, single people, different orientations, genders. It's widespread. So we're definitely looking at a broad societal change, not just like isolated choices here and there. The numbers really point to something deeper.
Okay, so seeing numbers like that, the big question is just why? What's driving this? When we dig into the why, McClarty's sources offer some really fascinating insights. It's not just one thing, is it? They talk about this complex mix of factors. The first big category they identify is cohort and lifestyle shifts. What does that actually cover? How are these generational changes playing a role?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Cohort and lifestyle shifts. It's basically looking at how the way we live has changed over generations. For instance, the data shows that younger generations, so millennials and Gen Z, they actually had lower rates of sexual activity before the pandemic even started.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't just COVID.
Exactly. It was an existing trend that the pandemic likely amplified, but didn't necessarily create. But the really big predictor, the sources point to, the strongest one, it's the decline in marriage and cohabitation rates.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Right? Fewer people living together in committed partnerships, whether married or just living together. When that happens, the sort of built-in opportunities for regular intimacy just naturally decrease. It changes the whole context. It's less about individual desire sometimes and more about these larger structural shifts in how people are pairing up or not pairing up.
Okay, but I bet for a lot of people listening, their minds immediately jump to screens. Technology. And yeah, the sources definitely go there. Technology and social disconnection is another huge piece of this puzzle. How exactly is our digital life feeding into this real-world intimacy decline?
Oh, it's a major factor, no question. The sources detail how things like increased screen time, heavy social media use, lots of gaming, and also, more directly, pornography consumption. They all contribute to less face-to-face intimacy.
How does that work, though? Is it just distraction?
It's partly distraction, sure, but it's also what the sources call digital displacement. These online interactions, whether it's social media or gaming or porn, they can kind of act as substitutes for real, connection, or gratification. They take up time, they take up emotional energy,
Mhm.
energy that might otherwise go into building or maintaining real-world relationships.
Right. So it's not just what we're doing online, it's what we're not doing offline because of it.
Precisely. And for some people, the curated, maybe less messy world online compared to the effort of real intimacy,
Mm.
it might seem easier or less daunting.
That makes a lot of sense. But it's not all about tech, right? The
Mhm.
sources also point to pressures in the real world, things like economic and psychological pressures. How do those fit in?
This is where we see how those everyday stresses really impact our intimate lives.
Hmm.
McClarty's research talks about just widespread stress, economic anxiety, cost of living, job worries. That's huge for people.
Definitely.
And also something they call dating fatigue. People just
Yeah.
getting exhausted by the whole process.
Dating fatigue, I've heard that,
Yeah.
especially after the pandemic.
Yeah, it seemed to have really ramped up. Endless swiping, getting ghosted, interactions feeling superficial. It's draining. So when you're constantly stressed about money or juggling work and life or emotionally worn out from trying to connect, your capacity for vulnerability, the energy you need for real intimacy, it understandably shrinks.
Yeah, it's hard to focus on connection when you feel like you're just trying to survive.
Exactly. Intimacy often takes a back seat when basic security feels threatened.
And then there's Gen Z, our youngest adults. The sources seem to suggest they're facing a really unique situation, almost like a perfect storm of different factors shaping how they approach intimacy.
They really are. The picture the sources paint for Gen Z is quite specific. Think about it. They're key formative years when you're learning social skills, how to connect. Happened right during peak pandemic isolation for
All
many.
right, that had to have a massive impact.
Huge. It pushed connection even further online, often without that balance of real-world practice. Then you layer on top of that just confusing messages from media. These idealized romance stories on one side,
Hmm.
and then hypersexualized hookup culture on the other. And often the sex education they get isn't really equipped to help them navigate that complexity.
So they're kind of left trying to figure it out on their own.
In many ways, yes. And then add the political climate, especially around things like reproductive rights. That adds a whole other layer of anxiety and uncertainty to their decisions about intimacy that maybe previous generations didn't face quite so directly.
It's a lot. It really shapes their whole perspective.
Absolutely. It's this confluence of factors creating a really complex, sometimes conflicting set of pressures. It's no wonder some might approach intimacy with more caution or even pull back.
Okay, so we've talked about generational shifts, tech, stress, Gen Z's unique pressures. But what I found really fascinating is how the sources bring in these collective voices. People, especially from Reddit, arguing it's not just about individual habits. They seem to be pointing towards something bigger, more fundamental.
Yes, this is a really powerful part of the analysis. These collective voices articulate this idea that the root issue might be deeper. They talk about a lack of belonging, a lack of real community. They mention the creation of alienating environments that just sap our time and energy for building relationships.
Alienating environments, like what?
Well, think about modern work culture, the gig economy's instability, long commutes, maybe the decline of local community hubs. Even just the mental load of navigating life today, these aren't just personal problems, they're systemic factors.
Hmm?
There's a quote from one Reddit user that captures it. The article mostly blames pornography and digital addiction, but the larger problem is lack of belonging and community.
Wow. So the argument is, if you feel disconnected and exhausted by your environment, how can you possibly have the energy for deep intimacy?
That's precisely the argument. Intimacy needs a foundation of security and connection, and these voices are saying that foundation is crumbling for many people.
That really makes you stop and think differently about it. And this leads perfectly into those loop speak debate prompts you mentioned from McClarty. They're designed to challenge our assumptions, right? Like the first one. Are we retreating into screens because connection is broken? Or is intimacy broken because we chose screens? How did the sources lean on that?
Exactly. These prompts push for that deeper thinking. That screen question is classic chicken and egg. On one hand, yeah, excessive screen time definitely displaces real-world stuff. We talked about that.
Mm.
But the sources also suggest it might be a feedback loop. Maybe people are turning to screens because finding genuine connection in the real world feels harder or more fraught.
Ah, so the screens become a coping mechanism for an existing problem.
Potentially, yes,
Yeah.
or at least part of the picture. It suggests maybe there's a deeper fracture in our social fabric, and screens are just an easy, if maybe unsatisfying way to try and fill that gap. It's likely both things feeding each other.
Okay, so it's complex. That leads right into the next prompt, which feels very connected to those Reddit voices. Is the sex recession the symptom or the symptom of a deeper collapse in belonging?
And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It challenges us to see the decline in intimacy not as this isolated issue, but maybe as a kind of indicator light flashing on the dashboard of society.
A symptom of something bigger going wrong.
Exactly. A symptom of that breakdown in community, that sense of alienation, that struggle for real belonging that those collective voices were talking about. When people feel adrift, disconnected from a supportive social network, it makes sense that forming deep, trusting, intimate bonds would also become more difficult. Intimacy thrives on that sense of safety and belonging.
And thinking about Gen Z again, there's that really poignant prompt. Are young people choosing celibacy or are they choosing protection from emotional burnout? That completely reframes their experience, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It moves away from just labeling them as, less interested or making a simple choice.
Mm-hmm.
It asks us to consider the emotional weight they're carrying. We talked about the pandemic, confusing messages, the anxieties. In that context, the vulnerability and effort needed for deep intimacy might feel overwhelming, like too much of a risk.
So what looks like choosing celibacy might actually be self-preservation.
It could be a way to protect themselves from more stress, more disappointment, or just the sheer exhaustion of trying to connect in what feels like a really tough environment.
Hmm.
It asks us to look with more empathy, I think.
Okay, so we've unpacked the numbers, the complex causes, this deeper question of belonging. What are the consequences? If intimacy is declining, what does that actually mean for us as individuals and as a society? It's not just about sex, right?
Not at all. The sources draw a very clear, very direct line here. Declining intimacy is linked to worse mental and physical health outcomes, period. It's also linked to lower overall life satisfaction.
Wow. So it really impacts our fundamental well-being.
Fundamentally, intimacy, genuine connection, it's not some optional extra. It seems to be pretty core to human health. When that diminishes, we see these ripple effects. Mental resilience suffers, physical health can decline, people just report being less happy with their lives overall. We're wired for connection. So a societal decline in it that inevitably takes a toll. It really challenges that idea that we can just be isolated individuals and still thrive.
And the sources also mentioned this isn't hitting everyone the same way, right? There are differences in how genders are experiencing this.
Yes, that's another important layer. The impacts aren't uniform. For men, the sources highlight a concerning trend, rising rates of lifelong sexlessness.
Lifelong, meaning never having had sex.
In some cases, yes, or very extended periods without sexual intimacy. This isn't just a temporary phase for some. And this often seems linked to broader issues of social isolation or difficulties navigating the complexities of modern dating for some men.
Okay. And for women?
For women, the picture is a bit different. The sources talk about how societal shifts are influencing their choices around celibacy and consent. There seems to be a move towards greater autonomy. Women might be becoming more selective, prioritizing their own well-being, or consciously deciding not to engage in intimacy unless it feels truly right and aligned with their values.
So it's reflecting changing social norms around women's agency.
Exactly. It highlights how evolving social dynamics are playing out differently across genders. The experience and the underlying reasons aren't identical.
Okay, so given all of this, the decline, the complex causes, the health impacts, the gender differences, it really feels like maybe the old scripts we had about intimacy just aren't working anymore. We might need a new way of thinking about it.
I think that's a key takeaway. The sources definitely point towards a growing need or maybe a growing call to redefine what emotional connection even means today. Part of that is about challenging those idealized, often unrealistic portrayals of romance and sex we get from media. The perfect relationship, the constant passion.
Right, which sets people up for disappointment.
Precisely. Instead, there's this push towards prioritizing meaningful, authentic contact, focusing on genuine understanding, vulnerability, shared experience, rather than maybe superficial interactions or trying to live up to some curated image.
Depth over dazzle, you could say.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's an invitation to rethink what we value in connection, what intimacy truly looks like in the messy reality of modern life.
It really brings us back to those loop speak prompts again, doesn't it? They force you to look deeper. As we wrap up this deep dive, it's so clear that the sex recession, as the sources call it, is way more than just a statistic. It's tangled up with technology, stress, generational shifts, and these really big questions about belonging and connection in our society.
Absolutely. It touches on so many fundamental aspects of how we live and relate to each other. So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over, building on those prompts. Consider this one. Is our numbness to intimacy self-defense or self-inflicted?
Ooh, that's a powerful one.
It is. It asks us to reflect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What role do we play individually in this whole dynamic? And what does asking that question mean for how you approach connection, intimacy, belonging in your own life moving forward?
Definitely a lot to think about there. This has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a complex and frankly really important topic. Keep asking these questions, keep seeking those authentic connections. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.